Pride fam, you really came through for me. So I want to start this episode by saying thank you to over 150 people who filled out the burnout symptoms survey. And today we're going to talk about what happened in that survey. Now, to be clear, this was not a very scientific survey. I wrote it very quickly. I didn't even put fatigue as an option. I could tell you that I didn't do that because we just assume that everybody has fatigue with burnout, but I didn't put it in there because I just forgot. So let's assume now that everybody has fatigue with burnout. And then we're going to talk about all of the symptoms that came up in more than 50% of people. And of course, this is the 150 people or so that answered the survey. That doesn't mean that your symptom will necessarily come up. It doesn't mean that what you are experiencing with burnout doesn't exist, isn't real, whatever. But these are, I was going to do the top 10 symptoms, but at the 10th, I was seeing that there was still a 60% chance of that symptom popping up. So I thought, let's do the symptoms that are over 50% that we see. Now, I asked about symptoms in three different categories. One of them was physical symptoms, things that are happening in your body. Another was emotional symptoms, so things that are happening in your emotional world. And the last was cognitive symptoms, so things that are more related to how your brain is functioning. And what was interesting is that there's a lot of cognitive stuff going on. That's not surprising. We know the brain changes during burnout. We know that there's loss of volume in the prefrontal cortex. We know that the amygdala is on fire. Like, we understand that there's going to be cognitive things, but there were a lot more than I was necessarily expecting. And you beautiful people did such an amazing job in the other category describing what your burnout meant that I'm going to read some of the quotes that you wrote in describing your scenario so that people can feel maybe less alone and a little more understood. But we're going to start with burnout symptoms that happen in over 50% of the people that answered this survey. That does not mean 50% of people that experience burnout. It just means 50% of the people that decided to answer this survey. There's 16 of them. I'm going to start at 16 and then go up. So the last one that I mentioned will be the one that happens the most. Coming in at number 16 at 51.1% is imposter syndrome. Lucky you, we have an episode about imposter syndrome with Nicole Khalil, either coming soon or may have just released, depending on when I decide to put this one out. So yay, glad that we're addressing that. We have a previous episode on imposter syndrome with Nina Blackshear that you can go ahead and find and listen to. But imposter syndrome in over 50% of the people. Holy moly, folks. That is really something to think about. How much is this a chicken and egg scenario too? Like, is the burnout creating imposter syndrome, or is the imposter syndrome creating burnout? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So if you have something that you're thinking about when this comes up, please let us know in the Facebook group. The Facebook group now, when you join, you will have to answer the questions and follow all the rules because things got a little wild in there and I had to block some people. So just know that if you haven't joined the Facebook group yet and you want to, it is a little more serious these days and we are protecting you even better than we had before. Number 15 on the symptoms list at 51.8% is an uptick in negative self-talk. Now, we're going to talk about that with some of the quotes later on, but this is just a noticeable difference in how nasty we're being to ourselves. This is really fascinating to me because if we understand that this is just a symptom of where we are, we might be able to turn on a little more self-compassion about it. Just knowing that this is sort of a thing that happens to a lot of people in this scenario, we might be able to say, okay, well, this is just a symptom. These are not necessarily my real thoughts. This is just happening because of where I am, what I'm going through, and this chronic stress. So that was interesting. The next one, also cognitive, at 52.6%, is wondering what the point of all this is. So getting to a point in your burnout where you're like, what the hell is all of this for? Why am I trying this hard? And this is, an existential crisis moment. This is a like, what's the point of life? And if you want my opinion, after my burnout and going through those questions myself, to me, the point of life is enjoying it as much as you possibly can and letting that joy spread to causes that you care about, to people that you care about, and to the world around you. And that's it. It's learn, grow, enjoy. Done. The next symptom, which is part of the definition of burnout, 53% of people said cynicism. Not surprising because that is part of the World Health Organization definition. The next, at nearly 55%, some combination of headaches, migraines, or neck pain. I put these in a category together, the three of them, because in Chinese medicine, there's often some sort of overlap between them. So I think I like to sort of think of them as one system. But if we broke these up, it might be a little bit different, but some sort of tension that's affecting the physical way that your head or neck feels as part of a stress response. That makes a lot of sense. We know that we tense our jaws and we tense our shoulders when we're stressed, so it makes sense that these symptoms would pop up. At almost 58% of people, we have an emotion, and it is dread. We have talked about dread a lot over the years on the podcast because it's something that a lot of people mention. Waking up and feeling dread, getting a project and feeling dread, getting an email and feeling dread, coming home and feeling dread, thinking, oh my God, now I just finished my workday and now I have to deal with you people, right? So dread is a big one. At just short of 60%, we have rumination, which is just this like constant cycle of thinking about the same things over and over and over again. And like, oh my God, that's another one. Like, is burnout causing that or is that causing burnout? Because it is exhausting to continuously go over the same scenarios that are not going to finish differently because they probably already finished. And you're now thinking about what you could have said, what you should have said, etc. We did do an episode on that. You can find it if you go into the Fried Episode Finder. You can find that at caitdonovan.com/Fried Finder, I think. If not, it'll be in the show notes. But we did do an episode on rumination too, and about some ways to deal with that because that can be, it's really easy to get stuck in that one. It's literally a stuck pattern. At the same percentage, just below 60%, we have this like inability to be creative, to solve problems, to be innovative, just like your brain is not working like it had before. Same percentage. So these three are equal across the board at 59.9%. Memory loss and forgetfulness. Now, this is really normal because your hippocampus, which is responsible for memory in your brain, has shrunk during burnout. Like you literally lose volume in that area of your brain that helps you compound and store memory. So makes sense that you would have memory loss and forgetfulness. Numbers 7 and 6 both come in at 61.3%, and they are depression and detachment. Now, a lot of times we talk about what the difference is between burnout and depression, and I have said multiple times that depressive symptoms can be part of burnout. Like if you have a tendency toward depression anyway, when you are burnt out, you will probably be depressed. If you tend toward anxiety, when you're burnt out, you will likely have anxiety. But they are a little bit different. And the big difference seems to be the sort of cause section. Like in burnout, you can figure out what your stressors are. And when you learn to work with them differently, you can remove burnout completely. Depression doesn't always work like that and seems to have a more insidious, deeper cause. But again, I'm not a therapist. I am not reading the DSM right now. I don't have the definition in front of me with all of the qualifying factors. But I experienced burnout without depression. But you can also experience burnout with depression. Like here, it's saying 61% of people have and do. So something to think about. Now, this is another cognitive symptom coming in at 62%, number 5, inability to think, plan, or motivate. So now we have inability to be creative and problem solve, in memory loss and forgetfulness, inability to think, plan, and motivate. So our brains are just the overall like pattern is my brain just isn't working like it used to. My brain's just not working right, which is obviously a really simple way to say it, but that's what it felt like to me too. Like I don't know what to do. My brain's not functioning. And then we stay in the cognitive at 72% of people that answered this survey say that they have brain fog. So this is a huge one. And now if you look at frog, not frog. I was just in France, not frog. If you look at brain fog from a nutritional standpoint, the most common reason for it is dehydration. So sometimes when we see somebody, when we're coaching somebody through burnout and brain fog is a huge symptom, a lot of times what we're offering people is honestly up your electrolytes, drink more water, because that can have a huge, massive difference. And when you're burnt out and you are in a pattern of self-neglect, self-abandonment, you're often not drinking when you're thirsty. You're not paying attention to that signal. And one of the major symptoms of that is brain fog. So that can be one of the ones that can last either the longest or be the first to change if dehydration is part of the issue. And it's really easy to check. It will take a week to sort of get yourself back up to hydrated. But if you drink more water with electrolytes in it for a week and your brain fog starts to disappear, then you know it was dehydration. Like this is a simple one to check for yourself. So if you're stuck in that, try that first. 75.2%, my favorite, anger, frustration, and resentment. One or a combo of those three emotions. You all know that resentment is my favorite emotion. It's the emotion that I help you tap into the most with the resentment journal mini course, because I know that working with this emotion gives you the most significant results the earlier in your process that you are, when you can just admit to and work with the emotion that you have instead of striving for something like gratefulness when you're just feeling so angry and frustrated, then we can make a huge, huge impact. The resentment journal is the only sort of DIY course that exists right now within Burn Bold and Fried because it's so successful. And 75% of people are experiencing it. 75% of the people that answered this survey said anger, frustration, and resentment. This is the number 3 symptom on the list. The number 2 symptom, unsurprisingly, are sleep issues of all different kinds. So interrupted sleep, oversleeping and like not feeling rested, having insomnia, not being able to fall asleep, any sort of sleep disturbance was included in this question. 85% of people say that they have issues with sleep. People get frustrated on the internet when you're like, focus on your sleep hygiene. And I can understand that. That can be really frustrating. And also, if this is one of the most major symptoms, if we can do something about this, then we can make a difference the opposite way. So one of the things that we suggest most frequently around here is to do yoga nidra or body scan meditations just before you go to sleep. It helps deepen your REM state. It helps increase the quality of your sleep, helps you stay asleep, helps you fall asleep, all of that stuff. It is most effective after 30 continuous days of use. And it's totally fine if you turn on the meditation and fall asleep while it's on. You don't have to listen to the whole thing. You're allowed to fall asleep. I personally pay for and use Insight Timer. It's my favorite meditation app. They do not pay me to say that. I do not have any sort of sponsorship from them, although I should because I mention them in a lot of episodes. Um, so but you can do free ones on YouTube if you want. You know, like you can find, and Insight Timer also has a ton of free ones available. You don't necessarily have to pay for the process, but issues with sleep, almost 85% of people. And now we are at the number 1 symptom that came up at 87%, anxiety. Folks, we're going to have to do a series of things on anxiety because holy moly, 87% of people. I was part of this percentage. I didn't answer this particular survey, but my burnout did include anxiety. And that is just, wow, a big one. I mean, good news, the same yoga nidra that helps your sleep can also help your anxiety and also helps the parts of your brain that have shrunk during burnout, helps those parts to regrow and reconnect. So, yoga nidra is a really low cost and or free, simple way to improve your burnout symptoms. Now, we're adding to this because what I want you to know that there are a couple of themes that come up overall within the other words that you wrote, the things that you added on to the end. One of the biggest themes and a symptom that I didn't have written down but probably should have, it's like shame and guilt. People were saying that they were stuck in cycles of shame and they were feeling guilty for not using rest like the right way. So shame, this sort of shame guilt bicycle that people feel stuck on. So that's one. Escape fantasies, which we have talked about since the very, very beginning of Fried. So, like 1,000 years ago, when we started this podcast, we talked about this, like wanting to disappear, sort of fantasizing about death or injury, because either of those things would give you a sociable, like a socially acceptable reason to stop what you had to do. Like it would give you an excuse to not do all the things that you do and people would accept it. This came up in the episode with Jen Fisher that kicked off season 10, where she said that, going through cancer was easier for her than going through burnout because people gave her more of a break when she had cancer. Everybody said, oh, go take care of yourself. This is really important. Take all the time you need. And with burnout, she didn't get that same grace from people. So a lot of us are imagining sort of severe scenarios where we'll get the break that we need and we'll get the compassion and the grace that we need along with the break. Next theme that comes up is this sort of real strong inability to rest. It doesn't matter if you turn your laptop off, if your TV is off, it just like your brain just doesn't stop. We call this tired but wired often in the burnout world. And so this sort of like, yeah, I could stop, but when I sit, I feel so terrible that it's not helping me right now. So we can talk about that in a future episode. We have talked about that. I think the title of the episode is The Difference Between Rest and Restoration. So you can use the Fried Finder to find that one. And then the last theme that came up was a complete loss of self, like forgetting what you enjoy, who you are, what joy even feels like, what things you prefer. This one to me is huge because the number one pattern that I see in all burnout scenarios is self-abandonment and self-neglect. So it's really hard to know what your wants, needs, desires, and preferences are if you are neglecting yourself for other people, for a job, to manage a workplace for whatever other reason. Like it's hard to know who you are and what you enjoy if you're not present in your own body because you're trying to solve other people's problems, um, people pleasing, perfectionism, etc. So that's a big one. And last, the inner narrative. So we said, what was the percentage? The uptick in negative self-talk, 52% of people, just short of 52%. And these are some of the things that you were saying. I barely pulled into my driveway before I was desperately touching everything around me, finding any evidence that I was real, I was alive, and I was okay. I had extreme sensitivity, I was argumentative, and I was feeling like all the spinning plates were crashing. Shame and failure feelings, no one to turn to, and it felt too late to ask for help. I'm usually an upbeat person who gives 110%, but I forgot to pay bills, take something out of the freezer for dinner. I just couldn't care anymore. I was convinced I was going to die from my physical symptoms. I didn't know what I was saying no to, but I just kept repeating it out loud. I collapsed at my front door and watched myself from outside my body. Loneliness and a heightened sense of comparison led to an even higher feeling of failure. the things that you're thinking when you're going through burnout, gosh, they are your chatter mind, your monkey mind, your inner goblin, your inner critic, whatever, however you want to name it. And they are so real for you when you're going through them. And you don't deserve that. You don't deserve to be talked to like that, not from you, not from anyone. This is why in healing processes, self-compassion is so important, and why such a big focus of Fried from the very beginning has been reducing shame, blame, guilt, and judgment around burnout, because none of those things help you get to where you need to go. So, folks, here's an update 2025 version of the most common burnout signs and symptoms. Let me know which ones were big for you, which ones you think should have made the list, should have made the cut and didn't. And yeah, just what you're thinking about, what you're feeling. All right. Until next time.